Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to episode 20 of Mr. Millennial's Revenge. I'm your host, Nick DeMaria. Thanks for tuning in. On the podcast today, I am joined by trumpeter, composer, bandleader, educator, and newly minted author, Mr. Jeremy Pelt. I am so excited to share this interview with you guys. As many of you know, I am a huge fan of Jeremy and his music, and we get to talk about his upcoming album that comes out this coming Friday, February 12th, 2021. It's called Griot, This Is Important, and it's companion book of interviews, also called Griot. And what a treat. What an absolute treat to talk to Jeremy. I can't wait to get into that stuff with you guys. Real quick, Jeremy has really established himself as a torchbearer in the music, and we get into that. And when in a few minutes, I'll get more into it. But Things are a little sad recently. Just this week, we lost Mary Wilson, vocalist Mary Wilson of the Supremes. Now, why would I be bringing up Mary Wilson, you think? I love the Supremes. I actually, aside from jazz, don't tell anyone, ska and punk. I love Motown. I love Stax Records. I love soul music so very, very much. And so I've been a fan of the Supremes. They're like a guilty pleasure, I guess, but Mary Wilson was a member of the group. And I was reflecting on her, her career. It had to be tough. It's got to be tough when you're in a group and maybe the lead voice or someone in the band gets more famous than the rest. I've never been in that situation myself. I guess that says a lot about my career, but to be in a group like the Supremes, or even more renowned in terms of this subject, but like the Temptations, right? You got the Temptations, and then David Ruffin, the original lead singer, and Stardom, very famously, Stardom went to his head, and he went solo, got fired from the group, came back for reunions and all that stuff. But no, I'm thinking if you're part of a group and you're not, the spotlight isn't on you, I want to know that person's story. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is it kind of relates to my conversation with Jeremy. We talk about the music being told, the history of the music being told to us through the eyes of those that were there, but not so much like the stars, quote unquote, the innovators, because you can get into a conversation about like that avenue, but what I'm talking about is like the sidemen. There's a great documentary out there. It's called like 10 Feet from the Spotlight or something. Man, I should have looked it up, but it's about like the journeymen, the sidemen and women, the people who were there when certain musical events occurred, but didn't have the spotlight on them. Mary Wilson makes me think of that. And there's something to be said about the Supremes. They are an incredible act, and they belong in music history just like the rest of the Motown family and lineup. And yeah, man, some really great hits were performed by them. So R.I.P. to Mary Wilson. And what I'm talking about is there are musicians out there who bared witness, whatever it is. They were there and witnessed musical moments. Like a great example. I always talk about Benny Maupin. I always mention him. I actually talked about him in the interview with Jeremy. Like Benny Maupin, think of the moments, think of the records he's been on. Think of the moments where he was there with, Miles or Herbie or Lee Morgan. And like, I would love to hear his stories. I'd love to hear what he could talk to me. Like, think about Live at the Lighthouse. What can Benny Maupin tell me about that gig? Like, and of course, like, Harold Mayburn as well, or Mickey Roker, but like, Benny's still alive, right? So maybe I should interview Benny Maupin and ask him about the Lighthouse recording, or being in Wandishi, or even fucking recording Chameleon. Can you imagine that? Like, I'm sure he had no idea that it was going to be the tune that it became, But that's what I'm talking about, like, with Mary Wilson. It's, and some of these other, I always bring up the Temptations as a good comparison, because, like, you've got these, other musicians, vocalists who were there, and I want to get their stories. And so upon reading Jeremy's new book and talking to him about this subject matter, it's definitely inspired me to to keep reaching and reaching out to musicians and learning their life story and in their points of view in historical contexts, because it's fascinating as all hell, but also how important it is to keep the music alive. History is important, and I think a lot of people forget, if we didn't focus on history, these stories would get completely lost. The narrative could change. The facts can be changed. We all know, like, right? Like, you got a memory, and if you don't, keep the details in line, it gets changed, and before you know, it's a tall tale. Think of any of your dad's fishing stories, right? That's a classic cliche there. So, I was just thinking, stream or download or queue up, put on the turntable some Supremes this weekend, and check out a tune on behalf of the great Mary Wilson and every other great sideman or sidewoman out there who deserves our praise and respect. Like, so dig in this weekend. And we also lost Cicely Tyson, actress and fashion model, but also a very important figure in the life of Miles Davis, one of his partners, and someone who he credits, if I'm not mistaken, for helping him get over drugs, especially when he went down that, like, dark period in the 70s and whatnot. But in case you don't know, she is on the cover of The Sorcerer by Miles Davis, and that was an album that stood out to me. When I was first getting into Miles, you've got this, like, you could just see the pride, like the pride in her face. Like, I don't know if I'm explaining this right. Like, you it's a profile picture, and it grabs you, And I remember when I was, like, first checking out Miles, like, I didn't know what album was what, and what which one do I check out? And that one, with its greens and blacks in the cover design, it drew me in. And her face, it's like, I always thought, like, what is she looking at? She died at 96. Shit, like, I hope to get close to that age. You know what I mean? And she was an acclaimed actress in of her own right. And I'm not gonna say that, like, I was a huge Tyson fan, but you got to represent, right? You got to recognize the talent and the power, and I appreciate her. And and especially, like, based on my knowledge of Miles's life, I appreciate for everything she did for him, because what's the expression behind every great man is a great woman, or something like that? Man, sometimes that's true. That's certainly true. So R.I.P. to the great Cicely Tyson, and man, we can only hope to reach the golden age in 96 and look back on a life well spent, and everything that comes with it. So rest in power to seriously a Titan. So I'm really excited to announce that Mr. Millennial's Revenge is officially on Apple Podcasts now. It was a little tricky, I will admit, but I was able to figure it out. And, I know this is like celebrating, like, low bar achievements, but I'm not techie in that regard. My technology skills only go so far. And I'm really excited to announce that now you can get this podcast on Apple Music. Of course, it will still be on YouTube. YouTube seems to be a good platform, for getting the podcast out and quick and very quickly. So, still check us out on YouTube, and then check us out and hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts. The next step is Spotify. So, keep your eye out for that, and, definitely subscribe. I'm going to try to upload all the episodes that I've recorded already, and then start uploading new episodes as they come. So this episode will probably be the next one I put on Apple, just to kind of, get things up to date, but expect the backlog of episodes to show up. So check us out. Mr. Millennial's Revenge is now on Apple Podcasts and YouTube, and make sure you hit that like button at the New Haven Jazz Underground Facebook page, facebook.com/NHJU. Okay, so if I could nerd out just for a little bit, guess what? The Expanse Season 5 has ended. Now, I've mentioned the Expanse on the show before, so bear with me. No, Season 5 of The Expanse, it's a show on Amazon. I've talked about it several times. It's like a sci-fi show. The quickest way to explain it is it's Game of Thrones in outer space. Season 5 did not disappoint. What's kind of miraculous is Jeff Bezos is like a personal fan of the show, so he saved it from being canceled, and He should be paying more in taxes. He should allow his employees to be a union. But I'll give it to him. Thanks for saving the show. Because what an incredible season. It was based on a series of books. Book 5 is called, if I'm not mistaken, Nemesis Games. And man, what a fucking wild ride of a book. I couldn't wait for this. I couldn't wait to see it on the screen. I don't want to give too much away, but basically, I've said before, and I'll repeat, think about a couple hundred years in the future, Earth and the moon are, humans have colonized the solar system. You got Earth and the moon are like one country. They're in a Cold War situation with Mars, which is like a military republic, which is really, really hip. And then you've got the Belt, they're called, the Outer Planets Alliance, or otherwise known as the OPA. And they're mostly colonies on asteroids and moons of Jupiter and Saturn and stuff. And, you got Earth and Mars, always, eyeing each other down, finger nearly on the button. And, they're taking advantage of the Belters, who are the ones mining rocks and resources out in space. It's really cool. The politics of the show are amazing. And the action is just too fucking good. So if you need a hard rec for something to watch, especially during the pandemic, I cannot stress The Expanse enough. It's just so it's so good, and it's presented in such a great way that makes it look real. I know a lot of sci-fi shows on TV, they usually look really stupid. I feel like they started getting good when Battlestar Galactica in 2004 showed up. But man, I cannot wait to start reading book 6. It's an incredible story. There's a lot of alien shit in it. There's space battles, zero-G shit. It's not like Star Wars. It's not like Star Trek. This shit looks real. The way the spaceships maneuver and the way they operate is science-y. You feel like you can actually see people living like this. And the books do a good the show does a good job of following the books. Basically season 5 was book 5, season 4 was book 4. So that's a lot of fun. Hopefully though they take a cue from the Game of Thrones people and don't fuck this shit up when it gets to the end. So so recommendation from yours truly, The Expanse on Amazon. I am not doing a commercial for Amazon at all. Just as a fan of good sci-fi, I strongly recommend you check out that show. So please do, please do, so that they don't cancel it and they finish the entire series. All right, let's do the housekeeping. The New Haven Jazz Underground is a grassroots community-based organization dedicated to presenting concerts, clinics, and jam sessions, all in the name of jazz, in the great city of New Haven, Connecticut. And we are completely crowd-funded, and we need your support. Please go to patreon.com/NHVJU and sign up for as low as $2 a month. You won't even notice that money is gone. Even if you sign up for $5, I'm willing, maybe $10 is worth it, but definitely the $2 and $5 level. You won't even notice the money's gone, and you're going to be directly funding jazz and jazz concerts and all things we do at the Underground directly. And let me say thank you so much to our patrons for keeping the lights on during this pandemic. I know it's been tough, but I know some of you guys are still working from home, so you got that income. You can help out a little bit. A little bit from everyone is a lot, and we need your help. We simply need your help, and you can see the fruits of our labor either currently by listening to the podcast Mr. Millennial's Revenge, or tune in tomorrow night, February 11th, is the return of our Mind the Hang Jazz Series, and that's a concert series that we present from the Ellie Center of Contemporary Art. It starts at 7 p.m. featuring the Brandon Terzakis Trio. We are going to stream the show live from our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/NHVJU. Go live on Instagram. That would be NHV_Jazz Underground. And later on, we will put the show on YouTube. So if you missed the show live, you could definitely catch it. Either go to the Facebook page and check out our video section, or go to YouTube later. Definitely check us out. And thank you to my main man, Alec Rice, who's been on the show. He's my production guy for the series. So we are back. Mind the Hang is back with like I said, the Brandon Terzakis Trio. Tomorrow night, February 11th. At 7 p.m. This is going to drop tomorrow, so basically I should be saying tonight, but you get what I'm saying. Anyway, the only way we're able to do this is with public donations and individuals supporting. So please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/NHVJU, and thank you for your support. And now on to the interview section. Okay. This episode means a lot to me. It really does. And I fully admit that there's some fanboying going on. I don't care. I first came to hear Jeremy Pelt at the club Sweet Rhythm in New York City in either 2005 or 6. I was towards the end of my college, my undergrad years. He played in a quartet with Xavier Davis, Buster Williams, and Carl Allen. I'll never forget this performance. And I just got drawn into Jeremy's style. And his style is basically like take every classic trumpet player, mold them together. Like Jeremy is a torchbearer of the tradition, and he's turned it into his own identity with his own touches. And like the day after I saw that gig, I went and bought his record Identity, which had just come out. It's still one of my favorite jazz records of all time. I always listen to it. It's every tune on it is magnificent, and over the years, I don't know how to explain it, but basically I sought him out, and I started, like in a weird way, like kind of following, like I just went to his gigs and just made sure I talked to him after the set, and before you know it, I was taking a couple lessons with him, and that's been going on for a long time, since at least 2005. So it's pretty great to consider the last 16 years, and to consider him a friend at this point. So I can't stress enough how wonderful this conversation was. And Jeremy has had many different projects. He's done trumpet quartet, quintet. He's done a quintet with 2 drum sets, which is very interesting. He's had the quintet with him as the only horn, and there's a percussionist. His current band is a trumpet quartet with vibes. So trumpet, vibes, piano, bass, and drums. Last year, he released an album called The Art of the Intimacy, and it's a collection of basically standards and recorded with none other than the great George Cables. Peter Washington makes a couple appearances, but George Cables is one of my favorite pianists. I could rant and rave about him forever, but they were because of COVID, the tours for this record were cut short. So unfortunately, I felt like this record did not get the same amount of exposure it should have gotten. Excuse me. But on Friday, February 12th, Jeremy will release his newest album called Griot. This is important. And it comes with a companion book. Well, not comes. You got to order both. Make sure you do. Now, make sure you do order both. In the whole, and basically the gist is Jeremy made sure to tap into these amazing sources of jazz history, and he recorded interviews with very established musicians in the music. And the book is wonderful. The record is basically based off of his interviews, featuring this quintet band. And man, just hip shit. Like, I know I'm fanboying pretty hard right now, but it's just something you need to check out. So check out my interview with Jeremy, and then make sure that you go on Friday, order his book, and buy that album on iTunes or wherever you get your music. But yeah, enough rambling. Let's get to the interview. Here's my interview with trumpeter, composer, bandleader, and author, my friend, Mr. Jeremy Pelt. And joining me now via Zoom is trumpeter, composer, bandleader, educator, and now author, Mr. Jeremy Pelt. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How you doing, Nick?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you. We text quite often, but what's that?
I said, good to see you, however remote.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying, like, we talk semi-regularly, but it is a pleasure to see your face because, as I say to a lot of people I've had on the show, sometimes the show feels like an excuse just to catch up with people because, of the times.
Of course.
So, I wanted to start this is a real treat for me to have you on the show. Anyone who knows me and including yourself, I'm a huge fan of yours, both as a musician and a human being. And I've always respected the way you conduct yourself, carry yourself, the way you approach the music, and this will lead to your new novel, your love and acknowledgement for the history in the life of jazz. Mm-hmm. And even that very word, which I've got questions for down the line. But can you tell us about the upcoming record that's coming out? Today is February 10th, and on February 12th, your new record and your new book drop. Tell us about it.
Well, so the history of the record, as far as the release is concerned, is that roughly about I'd have to go back further, so I will. I first read Art Taylor's Notes and Tones. I want to say when it first came out, even though copyrights say that it was back in the 70s and whatnot, so that wouldn't have been when I read it. But there were new versions or new editions, and I think I read one of the newer editions that came when it first came out. So I was a teenager then. But I had also been into jazz. This was my first year at Berkeley. And I was excited at the concept of it being, musician to musician interviews, and he's interviewing, all of our favorites, Dexter Gordon, Miles, Sonny Ron, and just seeing how the musicians interacted with each other. And so that was a book that I'd always come back to at various points. Maybe a few years after I moved to New York, I would always kind of have this notion in my head that, you know what, somebody should do something with the newer generation, something like Art Taylor did. And, and then all these ideas always start out like somebody should, somebody
Mhm.
should, somebody
Yeah.
should,
Yeah.
And then, so now fast forward to 2018, I'm sitting on the couch lazily, and I've always had an affinity for drums. So, I'm looking at all these videos on YouTube of, like, interviews with Art Blakey, interviews with Philly Joe Jones is a great one where he's talking for like 2 hours and he's playing piano and all this. And then go on this interview with I found this interview with Warren Smith, who I've known for quite a while since I've moved to New York, and Art Taylor. And this was something that they did at the Schomburg Center in Harlem back in '94, I believe. And I was just like, entranced by the whole thing. I sat there and I watched the whole video, and it was almost 2 hours, and there was some great insightful questions asked and answered. And he even played some, and it was just great. And that was the moment where it was like, you know what, I replaced somebody with I should, you know.
Right.
And so, and because it it worked in tandem with the fact that I knew, I have a connection to a lot of these older cats. So the first way that it came to me, the first wave was, quite frankly, that I wanted to do a book of unsung jazz heroes. That was the first, thing. So I started to gather, like people that, and this has no kind of deference or any kind of vibe with, the legends that are famous that we know about, because obviously they should be celebrated, you
Mm.
know.
Mhm.
But I wanted to also capture the stories of, kind of like the soldiers,
Yeah.
the unsung soldiers of the music that were making things happen. So, and because I played with a fair amount of them, I had that access. So Warren Smith was like the first person. So I went and, I said, hey, listen, man, can I come and sit in your living room? Obviously, this is pre-COVID, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I sit in your living room and I just got some questions. And I appealed to Warren just by saying, look, I saw your interview and this is the thing that got me started. And so he welcomed me with open arms. I sat there, got his interview. Then I said, Paul West, me and Paul came over to Paul West's house, did the same thing. Bertha Hope, we met at a restaurant, did the same thing. And then, and so I had those 3 interviews, or maybe 4, I forgot who the fourth person is. But then I was on the road later that year with Kenny Barron, and we had to go to Boston for 2 days. And so in that time, I'm thinking I would be a complete idiot if I
Right.
didn't get,
Right.
if I'm here with Kenny Barron and I didn't get his story, even though he is, somewhat celebrated now, I would still be an idiot if I didn't get it.
Of course.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I called him, I spoke to him. I said, hey man, can I interview you one afternoon, just an hour? So, and he's so, he was so welcoming. He said, yeah, sure. And so we did it right there in the club,
Yeah.
and then that's when I started thinking, you know what, I should, then my direction of it changed just a little bit to start to be like, I mean, this especially after Kenny, then I kind of loosened the direction a little bit, and not and said, you know what, let me just get as many generations as I could. And then I started to think, well, my generation has a story too. We've been through, some things at this point, in the 40, in our 40s.
Mm.
And I had and Kenny had Jonathan Blake on drums, and me and Jonathan Blake go back to when we were, students. So I
Mhm.
called Jonathan. I said, man, let me interview you. So I got him. And then that's when that started, I compiled a list of everybody I wanted to interview.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, and I just, that's what the process was. So now, and so I this is a very circuitous way of telling
It's
you
all
that.
right. I got the outline, so I know how to reel you
Right,
back in.
right. So I say all this to say that the purpose of the record really came out of the book first. So then
Makes
I
sense. Yeah.
yeah, I did all these interviews and I recorded them all on my phone. So I had these sound bites. I have everything, recorded. And I said, what if I were to make, pick a few of these sound bites and compose music to them? And that's what I did.
Yeah.
And so I picked, a few, and I used those sound bites as a prelude to the piece that I composed for it.
That's really fascinating. But kind of like from what I know of you, that kind of makes sense, that thought process. Like the book came first, then the songs came second. Then then you have these really personal songs, and a great example is the song that occurs right before or right after the Larry Willis segment. So I'm queuing it up now. Underdog. This song was just released. Like, I'm not gonna lie, man, I gasped at the beginning of the tune, because you have this like 1 minute clip of you and Larry talking, and he's preaching really deep stuff, and then all of a sudden the downbeat comes in, and I was just like, oh, like, like I had this visceral reaction. And I'm glad that like that I have the access to both the book and the record, because they truly go hand in hand. It's almost like I won't be able to listen to the album without at least listening to that track, or going back and read like my favorite snippets of the book or something. It's almost like I'm going to have two versions of this record, right? I'm going to have the version I just play and enjoy, and then I'm going to have this like when I'm sitting down and digging in deep and really contemplating the music. Just to back up a little bit, the album and book are both called Griot. And you say, and you have said that, and anyone who is unfamiliar with the term, a griot is a member of a class of traveling poets, musicians, and storytellers who maintain a tradition of oral history. And this originates in West Africa. And what a better, I mean, like, find me a better adjective for a jazz musician. Just calling the record and calling the book Griot plants a flag that like this is about where we've been and where we're going and where we are. And man, like you just you just nailed it. And like part of I was texting you this the other day to I'm not to give too much away, because I want people to be surprised the way I was, but you interview some of those what I call the second generation guys. These are the guys like Larry Willis, and I was texting you this, Stanley Cowell, Eddie Henderson, are Grackenmacher the third.
Just to be clear, I didn't interview Stanley Cowell.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No. I'm saying like the generation of guys. Yeah. The generation of guys who were the sidemen in like the Blue Note era rosters bands. And I've always thought like those guys saw so much, and I'm dying to hear from them. Like I admire that you worked with George Cables and on the last record, the record with George, like, man, how did you even get any work done? I would just be asking him question after question after question about just like, hey man, what was it like, playing with Freddie in the early 70s, and were you, just stuff like that, to musical concepts and stuff. I mean, I would just be bugging these guys, and it's awesome that you've included that generation. That's almost like, it's almost like the older generation of the book, because you range from those cats that are in their 80s all the way to cats my age, which is younger and just a little bit, but significant. And I will get to that point in a second. But I'm so glad that you got Larry, because we lost him so recently, so it makes it even more special. But the book, there's many themes in the book, and one is about controlling the narrative. And I feel like reading this book, I thought of it as a constructive approach to talking about race in the word jazz, and the responsibility that musicians have to the music. So like there's two responsibilities I get out of this. The history and the musical history, quote unquote. I'm talking like the subjective points of view, and then the musical points of view. Obviously, the current times have had, and all the way back to, I'm sure, your childhood had to have influenced you. What made you like? What made you focus on that theme, the theme of controlling the narrative of the music?
Well, it's not so. Just a slight correction. It's not the narrative of the music, because the music is going to control that itself.
Sure.
I mean, and also because music is so subjective that, I could say this is what I meant, or this is what I was thinking, but you might envision something else. So in that respect, I don't necessarily want to control the narrative too much of the music. The narrative of the history is what I'm talking about.
Right.
And how it's shaped and how it's perceived and how it's passed down is very important. And when you mention something like, okay, the events of last year, well, for Black folks, that's a drop in the bucket. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Of a lot. So I don't know that last year was this major turning point of focus, that I'm going to be like, I'm going to go ahead and release that. Just like, I think I posted a few weeks ago on Facebook that I was like, oh yeah, somebody told me that this both of the book and the CDs coming out on Black History Month, and I didn't even consider that, because I wasn't thinking on those terms of capitalizing on it from that angle.
Yeah.
So the preservation, you come to it at a certain point. It's about a certain kind of maturity and picking and seizing the time that it comes to you. So for me, it wasn't about the unrest that followed the George Floyd killing, and subsequent things, because all that is something that is sadly ingrained in all of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But one thing I will say about last year is that when you have time to sit down, because you can't go anywhere,
Right. Yeah.
then you start to really flesh out ideas. And so the kind of inspiration for that was, well, not inspiration, but the kind of the impetus for everything that you now have in front of you comes from the fact that now I've had time to just sit down, because I can't go anywhere.
Right.
And also because and so I'll be look, the book was started in 2018, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, people would say, "So when are you going to put that out?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, man, I'm just, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I'm just, yeah." And you always keep saying, "I'm gonna do it," but you're always on the road. You're always running, doing different things, different projects hitting you, which is a fortunate way to be. But you're always in the state of, "I'm gonna do it." So now sitting down and basically saying, okay, so for me, I was like, okay, well, the first thing I could do, I was still not completely sold on getting the book out. I mean, I knew it was going to happen, but that wasn't my focus. My focus was on, okay, well, I still want to release a record even in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
I gotta, one monkey don't stop no show. So I still had to do that. And so I knew that I wanted it to relate to this. So I already have, even when I record a record, especially when I record a record, I already know what I want to do in advance for the next record. That's the way my mind thinks. So when I was doing Art of Intimacy, I already knew that this was going to be on deck, So my focus then really became, and this was around March, April, it was okay to finish writing music. There's a picture, truth be told, of my trumpet. I took one of these little sexy little pictures when I was in Europe of my trumpet, and the lamp is low, and there might be a bottle of wine or something like that. And
Yeah.
this was when me and George were on tour in Europe the beginning of the end of February last year. And I was in my room and I was taking this picture, but I was suffering writer's block. But that was in the middle of me writing a seat at the table. So I was already working on this music
Yeah.
to record last September. So that was, that's what was happening. Then I tell you what, there's a guy that's a manager at Smalls, name's Jeff, and that gig, the last gig that I did last year was December 26th, right day after Christmas. Me and George did Mesro,
Right.
and
Yes. Yeah.
yeah, and so after that, everybody left, and I closed down the joint with Jeff McGregor, and he had just released self-published he's a transcription person, so he did these transcriptions, like a book of transcriptions of Mark Turner and I forgot who else, but these all these transcriptions,
Sure.
and I talked to him about the business of of publishing, and he said, "Oh man, it's super easy. You do this, blah, blah, blah." And as soon as he started telling me this, it was like the world just opened up, and that's what really lit the fire under me to start getting all the materials together to put this out.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
funny. I've said this to you before, but like it used to be January. Now it's kind of moved into February, but certainly this time of year is always like Jeremy Pelt release year, month or something. Cause I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
dating back to like, I don't know, Men of Honor, the talented Mr. Pelt, like you've had a record come out every year around the same date for the last 10, 11 years.
yeah.
So it's funny when your record drops, the first thing I'll snag a copy, I'll listen to it, back to back. And then my first inclination is, did I give the last record enough attention? And then I'll spend like a week just listening to the previous year's record, and then I'll go back to the record. And so when the Art of the Intimacy came out with George, I was like, man, here, you go back to the artist record and you're like, I gotta go back and hear that band because now this is different. What's coming ahead? So it's really refreshing and exciting to hear that like you are always thinking ahead in that regard to projects. Can you split the ability to enjoy your current project without thinking about the future one too much, or are they too, is it just two
Oh,
separate
absolutely.
yeah.
That's called being on the road.
Sure.
I mean, I could certainly enjoy it. We had a great run with Jeremy Pelt, the artist, the Rodin Suite. Had a
Yeah.
great run. We did 2 tours of Europe. We did a bunch of dates in the States. We did a West Coast tour. We did Japan. So we had a great reception with that. You know what I mean? And all through there, of course, I was enjoying, but I'm also thinking about, okay, I've got the urge to put out a ballads record,
Yeah.
and so that's when that came about.
And
And
so
then when I do, the Art of Intimacy, and after that came out, and obviously we didn't get the same kind of enjoyment of being on the road. That was cut short because of all this that we're in right now.
yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm like, okay, so now, and also because I put together something like that, knowing full well that I'm not going to be touring with George Cables exclusively all over the place. George Cables wants to do George Cables things.
Sure.
He's a great sideman as well. You know what I mean? But I give him all props as a leader and what he wants to do. So it wasn't my concept. My idea was not to usurp all of his time.
Sure.
With this, it was just let's do a couple dates, celebrate it, and then move on. He's got projects that he wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So always in the back of my mind, I'm like, all right, well, I got to keep the quintet working.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I'm sure I caught the quintet playing, Jeremy Pelt, the artist, but it feels like a million years ago. And then, then there was, except for, stream shows, there was no opportunity to see you with George. And So it kind of like threw things off, and it's like, oh, there's also this, this record is also kind of like reminding me that quintet exists, where it's just been like all of our bands, they've just been on standby, back to the book. And certainly when I say back to the book, the record is involved too, because they go hand in hand. One of the themes I really like is the mentor theme that is throughout the book. You ask all of your interviewees who mentored them, and you mention your own experiences. For the sake of just being a little silly, do you remember when you noticed that I was kind of hanging around you? I'm just curious.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Because no, you know what? Because the thing is a few minutes ago you talked about like basically like there's a subjective reaction to this work that just came out, and so I'm reading it and I'm thinking, man, first off, I never ever made the connection that you are my senior, what Roy was to you, and I find that really fascinating. So Roy Hargrove is about 6-7 years older than you. You're about 6-7 years older than me, and I took that to heart, because so the thing is like, just to officially share, I first heard you at Sweet Rhythm, and I think like 2005, 2006, you were playing with Buster Williams, Xavier Davis, and Carl Allen at Sweet Rhythm. And we went out, me and my college buddies went out because Carl Allen had just come to our school and just mopped the floor with us, told us about the gig, and we went out and caught it. And, this is still like before YouTube. This is before streaming. This is like, you're still buying records, to check people out. So, and I'm a poor college kid. I'm not able to get to the club, to the clubs as much as I want. So I really didn't have, I didn't have a figure to look out for until that night, man. And before that, it was Eddie, it was Dave Douglas, and those were kind of like my living guys, and then all the legends. But I remember, it was one of those things where I heard you play, and I heard the Freddie Hubbard especially, and I heard the Miles Davis influence, and I said, I need to follow this guy, follow this guy around. And from there on, I, sought you out. Around the same time, I had cold emailed Benny Maupin. I just emailed him one day and said, hey, Mr. Maupin, I'm a big fan of yours. And if you can give me any pointers, because I think he lives on the West Coast, and, and he replied, and he sent me this packet of things that he was working on. And the point I'm trying to get to is, you mentioned a couple of times in the book that like there's this need for younger musicians to reach out to older musicians, and I couldn't agree more. I feel like I say you guys, but it's like you cats are accessible, and you're human beings, and you have phone numbers, and you have email addresses and social media accounts, and younger musicians should be reaching out to you. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I mean, like in the book, you mentioned, you talked about like searching out Freddie Hubbard. Like I wish I could just follow you around while you were doing that, because again, like, Freddie died right when I got out of school, so you got to New York right around the time I started high school. So it's like, I was still a kid, when a lot of these musicians were still kicking.
Right. Well, I've always, something that it completely boggles my mind, because I think that in that sense, I think that it's a generational gap, and there are certain exceptions. You are an exception. But and as you read as you read in the introduction about me, I spent my summers sitting next to my grandfather.
Yeah.
So I'm getting all this information, whether I want to. Sometimes I just want to watch the cartoons, but he would be talking.
Yeah, sure.
But I was still getting all of this, so that taught me a bunch of patience, and it also instilled a bunch of trust in me that I can go to somebody that was older and seasoned and ask for advice. And it doesn't have to be. And then it also, then in my time in college, when cats would come to the school like Roy, of course I'm gonna be around Roy all the time, when he came out there.
Yeah.
Just and for me, I would just I also mastered the art of shutting the fuck up. Which is to say that,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes back to bite you in the butt,
Sure.
because then I wish I'd have asked them that if they're dead, But at the same time, I just enjoyed being in the company and just receiving whatever they did. That was how it was with Donald Byrd. When I met Donald Byrd, and I only met him a handful of times,
Yeah.
he loved to talk so much that I wouldn't. All I do is sit down, and he would just go on,
Yeah.
and it would be so fast. So that type of thing, and then and that's just in terms of just revering the history, but then also it becomes more functional when you are out here trying to do, you know, what you want to do.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes, a lot of times the younger generation presents themselves as being recalcitrant. And also there's this, and I'm not sure where it came from, but there's this kind of um I'll call it a new type of thing to where they're trying, and when I say there, I mean society is trying to erase the hierarchies.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is that they're supposed, I grew up in a way that you're supposed to respect, generations, you know, and that's
Yeah.
not to say that you bow down and lip service and all that. You
Sure.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, you're still a man, you're still a grown man, you're still a grown woman, so you still have to have respect in yourself. That's true. But I grew up in that society where you respect your elders, and what is happening now is that it seems like there's this push to have everybody on the same level.
Yeah.
And what's more is that, you know, they try to make you feel like an asshole when you say something like on the same level.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that you're going to compete with me if you're 19 years old and I'm 45 years old and I
Yeah.
have just that much more. You could have more chops than me.
Yeah.
I mean, there are kids that are 13 years old. You go on YouTube and they're playing
Yep.
Charlotte,
Right. Oh yeah. Yep.
um, you know. But on a musical sense, there's no competition, and that's okay because the bigger picture is you have to live to get to that and
Mm.
to learn. And the way that you learn and get all these experiences could be a lot of times is a missed opportunity for people to realize, younger cats to realize that there's a whole bunch of different ways to get the information. And
Yeah.
also just talking to somebody that has done things that you want to do presents itself in a way to where you could now realize things for yourself. But because the hierarchy is erased, and also, you know, there's a weird kind of competitive nature that's already established,
Yeah.
you know, that doesn't really come to fruition a lot of times because, quite frankly, it's like, okay, now I'm out on the scene now, and now I'm your competition, and it's like, you know,
Yeah.
there's what the press is going to put out there, and then there's what you know to be true. You
Yeah.
know, business wise, yeah, a 23-year-old kid that's got a record contract with a big label who plays, you know, whatever trumpet or that's just coming out is going to be in competition with a Wynton Marsalis, right?
Yeah.
From a business standpoint
Right.
of having records out, that's the only way you're going to be in competition.
Yeah.
You have no other leg to stand on.
Mm.
So what happens is that the younger cats, take that notion that I'm in competition with you, and they ride on that. And
Yeah.
that's the problem, because they're not understanding that we're here, like you said, accessibility is the key thing. We want to be
Yeah.
here to help you and just guide you in any way that we can. And not everything has to be of an avuncular nature, but sometimes it's just being around and noticing things.
Yeah. Yeah. I I wonder why, like I often wonder why. And sometimes, I mean, this is going to make me sound like the old man, but it's like, because social media allows you to get your own stuff out there, and social media is basically driven by younger generations. I think that's like kind of the cause of why some of this is happening, because like I'm a millennial. I'm an older millennial. I was born in 83. So like millennials are like 81 to 93, 93 or something like that. So there's this like weird juxtaposition where I can relate to older like Gen Xers and even boomers once in a while, and I could still relate to Gen Z because it's like we're right in the middle of like when technology was taken off and all this stuff. So it's like I I I see both, you know, I see both points of view, but man, like I just when it comes down to this kind of stuff, I just can't help but completely agree with you 100%. I remember being like a junior in college or a senior in college, and we were trying to figure out what jazz musician we wanted to bring for the end of the semester, right? To do a clinic and do a concert with. And man, this is like the early 2000s. And I'm like, hello, Horst Silver's still alive. And I think this was before his health like started deteriorating. And I was like, Horst Silver's alive. We should be reaching out to him. And there was so much pushback. Oh no, let's get so and so and so and so. And they were all, you know, and no disrespect to those musicians, but they were just at the beginning of their prime. You know, their names were being called up because they had a hit album out or something like that. And it was like, think of what Horst Silver could tell us in 45 minutes, you know? And I think, and I wonder if my impression is just shaped by my, my interaction with Eddie Henderson, because I had met him at a really odd time. They didn't have a jazz trumpet teacher at my college yet. They were getting one. So I had to spend, but they wanted me to take classical lessons my freshman year anyway. So there was no rush, but I was dying to learn jazz. So right before he happened to be a clinician at school, I had discovered the album Sextant. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, oh my God, what is this? And then there's a trumpet player on it. His name's Eddie Henderson. Oh, there's Eddie Henderson coming to the school. Let's see if they're the same guy. And before you know it, I'm chatting his ear off. And the stories he told me, like, I mean, you couldn't get me out of his apartment when I was first learning from him, because my lesson was really 20 minutes of music. And then I would just sit there with my head on my hands like this, you know, big bright eyes. And I'd be like, tell me another one, Mr. Henderson, you know, and because he would just tell you these stories. And I wonder if that influenced me to not be afraid to at least try, because I have approached musicians who gave me like the beat it kid, you know, approach.
I mean, there's always that. There's always sure. that you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Right. You know, I mean, I'm gonna they'll be nameless, but there were some that said like, I don't do this, and like got up and walked away. But you know, because of that, and with the with the pandemic, I reached out to Dwayne Eubanks, because you know, it occurred to me, I've been a fan of his for years, and he's not going anywhere because none of us are. So cold call, you know, I think I hit him up on Facebook and was like, hey man, I like you. Can I have a lesson with you? And, you know, I did a lesson with Nate Woolley, who is, you know, an avant-garde trumpet player. And it's, you know, I wanted to take advantage of the situation we're in, because what can I do but collect knowledge? Sure. But also, you know, it goes with like there's no bands anymore, and you know what I mean by that, right? There's no jazz messengers, there's no Miles, you know what I mean? Like there's no group to come up with. So this is the only way you're going to learn. Like one reason why I've latched on to you is like, I knew you played with Cedar Wallen. I knew you played with George Cables and Lonnie Plaxico and name after name and after name. And it's like, not only could you give me your approach, but you're handing me these stories of what these musicians taught you, and that is very much to bring it around again. That's very much in that griot mindset. You know, you're just giving me the information, and I feel like my career has been able to be successful because I paid attention to a lot of those, you know, a lot of those anecdotes, which you know, you could plead the fifth on this next comment, but you know, as someone who's now becoming kind of an elder in my scene, I work with a lot of younger musicians, and I've noticed that, like, man, I wish colleges would stop teaching their students that they're way more special than they are, because I think that's I think that's one of many problems, because you got kids who were like hotshots in high school. And it's funny. I'll give you a prime example. I was like the hotshot kid in high school. You know, I was the one playing lead trumpet, but also getting the solos and stuff. And I get to school, and in my first master class, he knows that he knows I bring this story up all the time, so I can use his name. But Andrew Beals, the first thing he says to me is, "What the hell are you doing up there?" And man, he cut me down to size right away. And instead of saying, "Well, fuck this asshole," what does he know? Instead, I started knocking on his office door every other day, you know, and I started, because I'm like, well, who am I to, I'm not going to say anything to him. So it's like, I'm noticing more and more students, or, you know, I don't know if it's because I'm becoming old or whatever, but it's like, I'm noticing more students like talking back instead of, or being like, oh, well, fuck him, he doesn't know what he's talking about, as opposed to, you know, taking a step back and being like, well, what is this veteran, elder, whatever, telling me, you know? And I feel like more musicians who are 19, 20, 21, they need to reach out to older musicians to kind of get it. I mean, I'm laughing because it's like, who am I going to piss off saying this? But man, this is a hill I'm willing to die on, because I you know,
it's not going anywhere. It's recurring. It's a recurring thought, you know. You're not unique in that thought. You know?
Yeah.
So it should anybody be offended. I mean, they've got a whole line of people that, you know, to stand behind, you know.
Yeah. It's, you know, I always say college, and again, no disrespect, but it's like colleges teach you to be too much Chick Corea and not enough Hank Mobley. And what I mean by that is, you know, being a sideman and trying to work with others. And, you know, instead it's more like, put the spotlight on me because I'm who I am. You know, it's almost like an entitlement thing, which, you know, again, I feel like I sound like my dad, but like, you know, but you know where I'm coming from on this. Like, it's important to, if you get hired for a gig and they give you a list of 10 songs, you should know those 10 songs when you get on the bandstand. It's like the least you can do. And I'll just leave it at that.
Right.
Real quick though, what again with the book, you interview so many great people. Some of these musicians. I mean, I was so excited to hear from Paul West, Bertha Hope, because I feel like, and Renee Marie, I feel like any women interviewed will almost accentuate the message of the book more, because like if time has taught us one thing, it's that like women are seeing it from the even deeper, you know, perspective, from the sidelines or the background or something. And I can't, and in a music that's so male dominant, and you know, luckily that's really being kind of dismantled. I feel like I feel like Bertha Hope would give me something really real, and without revealing anything, because I want people to buy the book. She did, and I'm like that was the first. I read your book out of order, so like I went to her first, you know.
Yeah.
I started on page 120, you know, and because I was like, this is where I'm going to get some real shit, is like from her, you know. I was so glad to see, like, you know, JD Allen, man, I could talk to you for hours just on him and Greg Hutchinson are just those chapters, man, were just like, like some of the raw shit I saw. And it's like it kind of validated how I feel about the music, even though I'm separated by 20, 25 years sometimes from this age group. But if I may, you bring up, you always ask the guests, what does the word jazz mean to you? And I feel like that's huge. That's huge, especially, you know, there's been a lot of debate within, I know my music circle, especially, you know, white musicians who want to stand in solidarity with their black, brown, people of color, brothers and sisters. You know, yours truly, there's a real divide on that word, you know, because a lot of white musicians are like, well, look, you know, I respect the following musicians and they say it's not a good word and we're going to stop using it. And then there's other musicians who are like, well, the musicians I dig don't care. So like, I don't care, you know, and, you know, and if I could just read, so you interview Ambrose in the
Mm-hmm.
book. Can I just share online what something he said that basically speaks to my heart? So he says in quote, "Of course I say jazz. I consider myself a jazz musician, but I consider myself a jazz musician because I want to put myself in line with other people who have been considered a jazz musician. I didn't know Thelonious Monk. I didn't have a conversation with him. All I know is that label has been put on him. And so in my mind, I want to be as close in line as I can today. And if that means calling myself as a jazz musician, that's fine. I really don't care." End quote. That's 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 it for me. That was the book for me. Was
Yeah.
that line. Um so to kind of wrap things up, what does the word mean to you?
I knew the day would come. Well, so for me, I start to understand all of where it came from. Uh, and it's almost like another thing that Ambrose said, which resonated with me, and also Eddie Henderson to a certain extent was saying that we understand the argument
Yeah.
of why it should change. For me though, it's and I think I did say this in the book to Eddie, in terms of, and I put it kind of like in a Shakespearean way when I was saying,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, call a rose called by any other name would still smell as sweet. It's for me, it's a name of a genre at this point. Now, I mean, there are a
Yeah.
lot of things, and actually, I know you asked me what I think, but one of the things is that when you say the Ambrose statement is the book for me, what Justin Robinson said was particularly poignant, and I don't mind sharing this. I still want everybody to buy the book.
Yeah.
For what he said, is jazz, like history, is like symbolatry in history, it changes. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
He was talking about, the symbol for the Third Reich was an Egyptian symbol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it shows up in like Hinduism
And
and
so,
Buddhism and
so,
stuff.
so it's like, and they weren't talking, but they weren't down with that. So it's the fact that it has changed and garnered respect is something that is noble, um enough to where I travel around the world and I'm heralded as such, and it affords me a certain amount of respect. So I don't necessarily get bothered by the thought of the word. I don't get repulsed. I don't, somebody says, "Oh, you're a jazz musician." If anything, what happens, and the thing that I do get, kind of, I guess, not mad, but miffed, if I could say it, is because there's so many things that are poured into it that present themselves in such a way that what I do is now has to be, relegated to a subgenre of a bigger of the name that, the original name. So now if I say jazz, and if such and such, this person only knows jazz and defines jazz by, KD Lang putting out a record of jazz standards, or Rod Stewart,
Oh
and that's
yeah.
in their
Yeah.
mind, then now I have to compete with that. So now if they say, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna come see you play," and then they're like, "What the hell is this?" You know what I mean? That's the danger in it. But as far as the word is concerned, I can't. It's so far removed, and I
Yeah.
understand, again, the argument, but I just don't. I don't find myself being particularly charged in the sense that, like some other people that we all know, that want to, lead a movement to necessarily change it. But if it does, okay. If everybody's on board with it, and then, and it goes all the way from the top, and you say jazz at Lincoln Center, now it's something at Lincoln Center or whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
at a certain point, it's just like, okay, I'm gonna go along. I'm gonna just keep playing whatever music I'm writing.
Yeah.
And what that music is inspired by is what was known as jazz.
Yeah.
Look, as great of an artist as he will forever be known as Prince. But what did Prince would it be called? The artist formerly known as Prince. Some people honored it. Some people were like, yes, that's the artist formerly known as Prince. But who the hell is like?
Yeah. I remember I was like a teenage, I was like a preteen during that era, and I was like, what the hell does this mean?
I mean, there's a heaviness to it, but
Sure.
at the same time, it's cumbersome. It's like, there was a show called The Boondocks, and the recurring character, and his name was a pimp named Slickback. But you had to say, you couldn't just call him Slickback. He said, no, you got to say the whole name. It's a pimp named Slickback. So anytime you refer to him, it's a pimp named Slickback. And it's like, that's a tongue twister. I'm gonna sit over here and try to say that every time I want to. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
The people are still gonna be like, even if they're diehard fans of Prince, like they got everything is purple, they're wearing eye makeup and all that shit, they're still gonna call him Prince.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So
right.
I don't understand, I choose to focus my energies on the creation of great music. And it's already been entered under a genre.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so that's what it is. And there's been plenty of musicians that you've read about, Miles, everybody that's had,
Yes.
I also, like I said, I've interviewed Kenny Barron, and Kenny Barron was talking about what Yusef Lateef called the music. And it was like this big, I got to go back and listen to some big scientific name that it was like, there's no way that's going to make the clutch. It's just not.
Yeah. Too many letters.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, well, this name is anti-disestablishmentarian. It was like, come on.
Yeah.
Anti-pro,
right.
Yeah, it was, but so like I said, I'll always understand the context of the argument, but it's not going to, it doesn't have that much of an effect on me, given the fact that we could all say yes. I mean, well, not it's even an assumption at this point. I'm making a general statement that says, well, we all know where it came from. But the further we get away from it, no, I'm not too sure that we all know where it came from. If I go on the street, do you know where the word jazz came from? People are gonna be like, get the hell out of my face. Nobody will be like, well, yes, I could tell. I mean, maybe 0.5% of 100 people will come up and be like, yeah, well, jazz originated out of New Orleans in the turn of last century, and it was in the whorehouses, and the madams, when they wanted to hurry, the Johns would say jazz. Nobody's gonna give you that kind of a
right.
They're just gonna be like, get the hell out of my face. I don't know where jazz came from. You're gonna get this. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just jazz. Where did rock come from? You know what I mean? Where did classical? Nobody's gonna, so in that sense, what people understand about jazz, which is a blessing and a curse, is that it's something that is of a higher respected type of music. And the reason why it's a curse is because a lot of people just want to dance. When you talk about youth, people ain't trying to, if they hear, when young people hear jazz, and I know because I'm the father of young people now.
Sure. You got your own little laboratory.
Yeah, they don't want to silver. That just means that they got to sit down and be still and listen and concentrate. And they don't want to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that's that. But at the same point, they realize that it's something to be respected in that regard. So nobody, and I could safely say this, is thinking about it from a cultural, from that part of the cultural aspect of, oh, well, this is music from whorehouses. Because maybe even now, I don't go to whorehouses, but maybe even now they ain't even playing no jazz, right?
Right.
What are they playing?
Trap and stuff. Yeah.
So, the whorehouses and everybody that's making music right now and playing music while they, doing, all their activities might be playing R&B and hip hop. They might be playing R. Kelly.
Sure.
So that
that would make more sense, right? Yeah.
Is more, dangerous or terrible than the word jazz.
Yeah.
You say R&B, that should be like, oh, you're a miscreant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Jazz nowadays, it's like, oh man, you have to be a smart person, which is exactly what we want people to think, because we are smart people.
Absolutely. That's a finite story right there, because you want it to be like people's music, very accessible stuff, but you also want to be taken seriously, and you want to be taken, it's funny listening to you, because it made me think of there was definitely, I think the Miles, like In a Silent Way documentary, and Matume, they're talking about electric instruments, and Matume says, like, the piano was the electric, it was the synthesizer of its era, and he says something like, I bet there were a bunch of harpsichord players sitting around like talking shit about it, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, like,
yeah,
right, like, there, at some point, musicians and fans and critics were arguing about what didn't matter to begin with, or giving it stupid names. I think, like, so, I came up in the punk, ska, underground garage band rock scene. That's my formidable years, and we used so many fucking titles. There was always, like, the word core was added to everything, and somehow that made it more legit. I don't even understand even to this day, but we used it just so you can explain what this band was going for, and it was there was never like, oh, this style is better than this style, or this word is a bad word, because it was like we were just using them as adjectives to just say, like, oh, like, because when I say I'm going to a punk, or I'm in a punk band, the layman knows what that means, or has a relatively focused idea of what it means. So it's like, when I go to book a gig at a bar, I'm not going to say, well, I play, anti-disestablishment, blah, 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 and because they're going to just hang up the phone. Yeah. I say I play jazz, and they know enough to just say, okay, I know that there's going to be certain sounds, certain instruments. That's it. And, but at the same time, I'm trying to be respectful to my brothers and sisters of color who feel a certain way about this word, but it's, like I was saying back at the beginning of this segment, like, just like this book, it's so subjective.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're separated, we're divided by the origin of that word. What now? Well over 100 years now. I mean, we're talking like we're now approaching like over a century of a division of this word, and how can't we evolve from it? Can't we move on from it, I guess? And I guess that depends on who you are and how you interpret it.
Exactly.
Well, listen, the record, the griot, I said this to you when oh, go ahead.
Griot, this is important.
Oh, griot, this is important. I apologize. Jeremy Pelt, griot, the griot, this is important, is the name of the record.
Griot, this is
I'll get it right. Jeremy Pelt, griot, this is important. It releases on Friday, and I believe Underdog, the song Underdog, was released first. And I will tell you that, as someone who's been following you, back to that first story, seeing you at Sweet Rhythm, the album Identity had come out. So I bought it the second I could, and I've been picking up your records ever since. The first thing I thought in like the first 10 seconds, and I texted this to you, was, I know when I hear a Jeremy Pelt composition. There is no doubt in my mind. And when I first heard the Black Art Jazz Collective album that came out, remember I texted you, I said, you composed the following songs, because you know what I mean? And I was like I think out of like what, 4 or 5, I had like four out of 5 of them or something like that. I was like really close. What I really appreciate is you have found your compositional voice. Like, man, I know it is you. And I think that is the best compliment I can give you. I know when I hear my pleasure, when I hear your songs. Yeah, man, you are a griot. I hear all those cats that we text each other, all, send each other, like, have you checked out this track and this track and this track? Man, I hear it all. And it is a pleasure to know you. And I wish you the best of luck with this release. It is so good. And congrats on the authorship. Looking forward to volume 2, because I know it's around the corner, because now you got it right now. You know how to make a book, so get a book published. So
and I'm still doing interviews too. So I mean, I'm stacking them.
Yeah, you should.
It's definitely gonna come out.
That's awesome. I hope that some young kid hears this and then, in 30, 40 years, they make a book and you got to be in it because, man, what a river of knowledge. So Jeremy, thank you so very much for being on Mr. Millennial's Revenge. Everyone can find you obviously on Facebook, Instagram. JeremyPelt.net is still the website.
Yeah.
The album will be available on iTunes Friday, right? The 12th.
Yep.
Okay. So everyone's got to go get it, and everyone's got to hit you up. Hit you up what, through social media to order the book, or
yeah, hit me up. Right as of right now, it's just available through me. So we're taking pre-orders, and it will be shipped out next week. But hit me up. You can find me on Facebook or on Instagram primarily, and we'll go from there. All the information's there on how to get the book, and also I'm also hosting a Q&A on Friday as well on both Instagram and Facebook.
Oh, excellent. So everyone tune in online to check that out. Yeah. Man, pleasure as always. Thank you so much.
All right.
Good luck to you. All right. Oh, man. Thank you to Jeremy for joining me on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. That was such a treat. I said it like 40 times in the, on this episode, but I truly mean it. Jeremy is becoming a leader in the music, in his own right. And I'm glad that we could have him on the show and talk about the new record and the new book coming out. So make sure that you get both the album and the book when you can. Support these musicians, like Jeremy, who are the next in the, I say this with respect, but the next level of elder statesmen and women of the music. They are our beacon and keep us focused. And I'm so glad that he continues to put out brand new music. Also coming up on Friday, Bandcamp Fridays, right? This has been a thing with the pandemic where Bandcamp will waive fees for artists. So make sure on Friday, payday, right? Make sure that you buy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 albums of clear that wish list. We all got them, right? Go into your wish list, clear it out, start buying the stuff that you might have been putting off for for a little while, or maybe there's stuff that you're really excited about and you could, it's finally released. But Bandcamp is certainly my favorite source of new music, and their app is great. I believe I've talked about it on the podcast. The app is really cool to play because you can. You get the tracks you could download, but they have a streaming app. So anything that you've bought, you can listen to stream-wise. And yeah, a lot of independent artists are there. It doesn't really matter the genre, to be honest, but this is a jazz podcast, so we'll focus on the jazz part. But seriously, go check it out. There's millions of songs there, and a lot of independent and not so known musicians are there as well. And I try to spend a couple of bucks every Friday and get something good and something new to check out for the weekend. So don't forget Friday band camps, and support local artists, your friends, our friends, everybody in the scene. If we all just spent like $10 on each other, imagine how much music would get heard. You know what I mean? So and to go down that road, my albums are on Bandcamp as well. So any support to yours truly is greatly appreciated as well. Once again, we've got the Mind the Hang returns this week, and don't forget, usually the second week of the month is the Mind the Hang concert. So we'll be announcing March's show pretty soon. So keep an eye out for that. I think that's it, guys. So make sure you hit that like button on Facebook, facebook.com/NHVJU. Like us on Instagram, NHV_Jazz Underground. hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And now Apple Podcasts, man. Hit it so that you can keep up to date on all the good things we're doing here at the New Haven Jazz Underground. So I think that'll do it. It's Valentine's Day this weekend. And, I hope you can cuddle up to that special someone and have an excellent weekend. And I would be remiss if I didn't shout out to my beautiful wife, Jill, who is the reason why this episode happened. Let's just say that. So happy Valentine's Day. So this has been Mr. Millennial's Revenge. I'm your host, Nick DeMaria. This is a production of the New Haven Jazz Underground. I'll see you at the next episode. Thanks so much. Take care.